The tires crunched against gravel as I turned down the narrow road outside Madison. On either side, fields stretched bare and silent, the September air carrying that faint bite of autumn. At the end of the slope, the house came into view just as it had in the listing photos, worse. Even, the siding peeled like old bark. 2 windows were boarded over, and the roofline sagged as though it had given up years ago. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the structure that had cost me $900 and every shred of goodwill left in my family. Caleb's voice returned to me, sharp as the day he'd said it. Then live like junk. His wife's eyes had flickered with satisfaction when he said it, as though she'd finally gotten him to speak aloud the judgment she always held for me. I stepped out, the ground soft from last night's rain. From the trunk, I pulled my old folding chair, the one I used for roadside breaks during long shifts. It felt heavier than usual as I carried it across the yard and set it down in the mud. I unfolded it carefully and sat, my boots sinking into the earth. The air smelled of wet wood and mildew. And yet, as I looked at the broken place, something inside me shifted. This house was mine, not borrowed, not conditional, not dangled like a favor I had to earn. Every rotten board and rusted hinge belonged to me alone. I pulled my coat tighter and let the chill sink in. For the first time in years, no one could erase me with a word. The silence was mine too, and it was enough to sit there until I was ready to walk inside. A week before I drove to the junk house, I had sat at Caleb and Vivian's dining table on the east side of Madison. The room was staged like one of Vivian's photo spreads, candles glowing low, a vase of lilies in the center, plates arranged just so, yet the air felt tight, as if we were all holding our breath. Vivian leaned forward first, her voice warm but edged. The Sedona retreat is finally confirmed. 15,000, all inclusive. I can't tell you what a difference it's going to make for my energy. She glanced at Caleb, then at me, her smile rehearsed. We just need that transfer you promised. I looked down at the ham cooling on my plate, then back at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His hand rested on the stem of his glass as he said quietly, "Mom, you said you'd send it last week. What's the delay?" The cutlery stilled. For a heartbeat, even the air seemed to stop. I set my fork down and folded my hands. I didn't transfer the money, I said evenly. I bought something instead. Vivian's head tilted, the kind of gesture she used when she wanted to make someone feel small. Bought something a house. I said, "It needs work, but it's mine." The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was judgment crystallizing. Caleb finally looked up, and there was no pride, no curiosity, only the cool distance of a man choosing a side. Vivian gave a short laugh, sharp enough to cut. "So you spent your savings on a dump instead of investing in family." I wanted to explain, to tell them what ownership meant after years of scraping by. But the words lodged in my throat. Caleb's expression hardened, and with a nod, the subject was closed. The next morning, my phone buzzed. The family group chat no longer listed my name. Easter plans disappeared with a swipe. And so did I. I stood staring at the screen, already knowing the silence would follow me into the house I had just claimed. In the quiet, after Caleb's silence, memories began to surface. Not the kind that soften with time, but the kind that burn hotter, the longer they are buried. I remembered the cafeteria at the University of Wisconsin Hospital, where I used to work double shifts. I'd watch the clock crawl past midnight, my stomach hollow because I had skipped dinner. Every extra dollar went into Caleb's college fund, and later, into the down payment for his first car. I told myself hunger was temporary, but security for him was worth every skipped meal. The day we drove that used Honda off the lot, His face had lit up with pride. "Thanks, Mom," he'd said, already gripping the steering wheel like the future was wide open. I never told him how I'd cashed out vacation days to cover the last payment, or how my knees ached from the endless hours on my feet. Now, years later, I scrolled through Vivian's online posts, photos of juice cleanses, yoga poses, and glowing captions about self-investment. Friends and strangers showered her with likes and praise for sacrifices that were really spa weekends. The irony stung. I had spent decades pouring myself out until there was almost nothing left, and no one had ever clapped. Not once. For a long time, I told myself they just forgot. Busy lives. Different values that was easier to believe than the alternative. But as I sat in my empty house with mildew in the air and silence pressing on every side, I understood. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was choice. They chose to look past me, to underline Vivian's every step while erasing mine. That realization was heavier than any debt I had ever carried, because it meant there was nothing left to earn. No amount of giving would tilt the scales back in my favor. I closed the phone and set it face down on the crate I used as a table. The house groaned in the wind, a broken screen door tapping against its frame like a reminder. I was here now, unwanted but unshaken. And the next knock would come sooner than I expected. The first night in the junk house, I learned how loud silence can be. Every floorboard groaned. Every draft hissed through cracks I hadn't noticed in the listing photos. The smell of mildew clung to the walls, sharp and stubborn, like it had soaked into the bones of the place. I set my bag on the cracked linoleum floor of the kitchen, the only spot wide enough to spread out a blanket, and sat cross-legged with my coat still on. There was no table, no lamp, no warmth but what I carried in my own body. I unpacked a single curtain I'd saved from my college apartment, a faded blue floral print. With a rusted step stool wobbling under me, I tried to wedge the rod into the window frame. It slid sideways, clattered to the ground, and left me rubbing my elbow where I'd hit the wall. Still, I tried again. On the second attempt, it held, sagging at one corner but upright enough. The curtain barely covered half the pane, yet it softened the harshness of the room. For a moment, it felt less like ruin and more like a beginning. I whispered to the emptiness, ugly, empty, and mine. I sat back down, pulling my knees to my chest, and let that truth settle. Ownership didn't erase the loneliness, but it steadied me in a way applause or approval never had. The phone buzzed in my coat pocket, startling me. I unfolded it, half hoping for a note of concern, maybe even regret. Instead, the screen lit with Caleb's name and a single message. Do not come to Easter. No greeting, no love, no explanation, just erasure, typed and sent. I stared at the words until they blurred, then folded the phone shut and slipped it back away. The room seemed colder, the silence heavier, but I refused to cry. If my own son could dismiss me with one line, then I had to find something stronger to hold on to than family approval. The curtain shifted in the draft, a flimsy banner of defiance against the night. I watched it sway until my eyes grew heavy, knowing the next knock on the door would test whether this fragile piece could stand. A week passed before anyone came near the house. I had begun to settle into its rhythm, fixing what I could with a borrowed hammer, learning which outlets sparked and which doors refused to close. I almost convinced myself I was invisible to the world beyond the sagging shutters. Then came the knock, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the thin walls. When I opened the door, there she was, Vivian. Cream-colored cashmere belted neatly at the waist, stiletto heels perched on the warped boards of my porch, oversized sunglasses reflecting the street behind her. Even standing still, she looked as if she were posing for a photograph. Well, she said, drawing the word out as though testing its weight. You've really committed. Her eyes drifted over the chipped paint, the broken screen, the yard I hadn't yet cleared. This neighborhood has standards. Iris. People talk. Her voice carried just far enough for the woman walking her dog across the street to hear. A public performance, sweetened with concern but sharpened with ridicule. Why are you here? I asked, keeping my arms crossed against the chill. She lowered her glasses to the tip of her nose. The spa wing at my retreat flooded. Burst pipe. A disaster. I had to cancel 3 sessions. Until it's fixed. I'm in a bit of a bind. She let the pause linger, waiting for me to fill it. I didn't. She sighed, shifting her weight so the heels clicked against the wood. Just for a night or 2. I can sleep anywhere, even here. Her words carried the same tone she'd used at that dinner table, pity wrapped in superiority. I felt the curtain behind me sway in the draft. My one claim of dignity fluttering as if listening. One night, I said at last, "Don't touch anything." Her face lit up. Polished gratitude replacing the cracks of irritation. She stepped past me as though she had been invited into a home that belonged to her. I stayed at the doorway, watching her heels click across my floorboards, already knowing that by morning, the walls would carry her laughter where it didn't belong. The morning light came in cold and flat through the curtain I had hung, streaking across the cracked linoleum. I moved quietly, making coffee with the dented kettle I had brought from my old apartment. The house was still new enough to me that each sound felt amplified: the drip of water in the sink, the pop of the baseboard settling. I thought I was alone until I heard laughter that didn't belong. I followed the sound into the kitchen and stopped. Vivian stood there, fully made up, her hair glossy under the harsh glow of a ring light she had set up on the counter. My kettle had been pushed aside to make room for cartons of oat milk and granola bars arranged like props. She was holding her phone at the perfect angle, speaking into it with a voice so sweet it could rot teeth. "We love a transformation story, don't we?" she cooed. Then she angled the camera toward the cracked tiles, the sagging cabinets, the mildew stains I hadn't yet scrubbed. "This is where my mother-in-law has been living. Can you believe it?" Comments buzzed from her screen, their chimes sharp in the quiet house. "Is this a shelter?" one asked. Another. "She looks like a squatter." Vivian smiled wider and turned the lens on me without warning. "There she is," she said brightly, as if I were a prize on display. Slippers and all Great Depression chic. Something in me snapped. Not loud, but steady. I walked over, calm as stone, and yanked the phone off the tripod. The suction of the pop socket releasing echoed louder than her gasp. "You don't get to weaponize my life for likes," I said, my voice even, almost quiet. Her mask slipped just enough for me to see the fury beneath. She grabbed her bag, snatched up her makeup case, and swept past me toward the door. At the threshold, she turned, her voice carrying for whatever invisible audience she imagined still listening. "This is what I get for being a good wife." The door slammed hard behind her, the ring light still humming faintly in the silence. I stood there, phone heavy in my hand, knowing this wasn't the end of her performance but the beginning of something larger. That night, the house was too quiet. I scrolled absently on my phone, trying to push away the echo of Vivian's voice still ringing through the walls. A notification popped up in a group I didn't recognize. Someone had tagged me in a fundraiser. I clicked, and there it was. "Help my mother rebuild." My face filled the banner, captured in an unflattering photo from the morning I carried garbage bags out to the porch. The caption beneath read like an obituary: "She's been through so much, but with your help, we can give her the life she deserves." The total made my throat tighten. $18,340, raised in less than a week. Recipient Vivian Reese Events. PayPal account listed clearly. I scrolled further, my stomach turning as I saw screenshots lifted from her livestream. my slippers, my cracked kitchen tiles, my bent curtain rod all transformed into pity props. The comments were full of praise for Vivian's devotion and sacrifice. Strangers sent money, believing her story of a selfless wife supporting a broken mother. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but fury. I wanted to smash the phone, to drive across town and confront her face to face. Instead, I froze when my ringtone broke the silence. Aunt May's name lit the screen. "Baby," she said softly, her voice crackling with age and truth. I saw what she did. I swallowed hard. They made me into a charity case. Her sigh was heavy, weighted with years of watching from the edges. "You were never the problem, Iris. You just weren't Vivian. That was your only crime." Her words steadied me in a way nothing else could. I looked again at the fundraiser, at the stolen images of my life twisted into someone else's currency. The rage was still there, burning low and steady. But beneath it came something clearer. If they wanted to profit from my ruin, I wouldn't meet them with another outburst. I would meet them with proof. I ended the call, placed the phone gently on the table, and pulled out a notebook. The first line I wrote was simple: document everything. The morning after May's call, a direct message blinked across my screen. The sender's name was unfamiliar. Elsie Tran. Saw the fundraiser. Civil exploitation at minimum. Possibly wire fraud. Document everything. Don't confront yet. Her words steadied me. Finally, someone outside the family saw what I saw. Not just humiliation, but a crime, dressed as compassion. I opened folders, saved screenshots, and clipped every time-stamped comment. Each donation, each photograph, each caption that painted me as a prop went into a neat stack of digital evidence. The more I gathered, the calmer I became. Anger drained into focus. Days later, Elsie's voice crackled through a short call, brisk and precise. "The letter is ready. Cease and desist. Drafted and signed. We'll serve it when she's most exposed." That moment came sooner than I expected. Vivian had announced a live stream Q&A, teasing her followers with promises of raw honesty. I tuned in from the corner of my kitchen, phone propped on a paint-stained crate. She appeared bathed in golden light, draped in linen like a saint of reinvention. Her tone was soft, humble, practiced. Sometimes family doesn't understand our journey, but we love them anyway. The comments filled with hearts and applause emojis. I felt my pulse quicken, but I waited. Then, right on cue, a knock rattled her set. The camera caught a courier stepping into frame, envelope in hand. Confusion flickered across her polished expression. She signed, opened it, and began to read. Her smile faltered. Her fingers stilled. The live chat exploded. "What happened?" She looks panicked. "Is this staged?" Vivian glanced at the screen, eyes wide, then away. The practiced mask slipped. Not cracked, but peeled clean off under the heat of thousands watching. The stream cut abruptly, leaving only static. I leaned back in my chair. The letter served, and the silence after sharper than any argument. For the first time, I felt the balance shift. The performance was no longer mine to endure. It was hers to survive. The ballroom at the Los Angeles Marriott glowed with chandeliers and camera flashes. I stayed near the back, unnoticed among sequined gowns and tailored suits. Watching Vivian move through the crowd, she was radiant in a shimmering dress, her laugh echoing under the lights. The banners read, "Callista Cares Healing Families. One heart at a time." The program began with slides of smiling children and stock photos of soup kitchens. Applause rippled politely. Then the screen flickered. A text message appeared in bold against the white backdrop. "Let her rot in that dump. She's good for sympathy points." Gasps spread across the room. Another line followed cry for me. "Baby, keep the cameras low. Show the cracks. The audience shifted, whispers rising like a tide, phones lit up, screenshots already flying. Vivian turned, saw the words, and for the first time, I saw fear cut through her polished mask. She tried to laugh it off, a nervous trill. Technical glitch. Folks. Will? Her voice cracked before she could finish. Then Aunt May rose from her table near the stage. She had been scheduled to deliver a speech praising Vivian's resilience. Instead, she climbed the steps with a steadiness that silenced the room. "I was asked to speak about hope tonight," she began, voice carrying without a microphone. "But hope isn't built on lies. This family has smiled in public while shaming in private. I won't pretend anymore." She turned from the crowd and walked straight to me, her arms outstretched. The embrace was firm, proud, unshaken. Cameras flashed, the room erupting not in applause but in recognition. Vivian's heels clicked furiously as she fled the stage, the train of her gown snagging on a chair. I didn't follow. I only stood still, holding on to May's embrace, and let the silence speak louder than her exit. A month after the gala, the house no longer smelled of mildew. Fresh paint carried a clean, sharp scent, and sunlight spilled through patched windows. Outside, children from the neighborhood crouched on the walkway, chalking crooked suns and block letters that spelled out, "Welcome home." Their laughter carried through the open door, lighter than any silence I had known in years. The community had gathered that Saturday for a cleanup. I set out a folding table with pitchers of lemonade and a plate of brownies. Neighbors hauled branches, traded gardening tips, and leaned on rakes while telling stories. No one asked me to prove myself. No one demanded I justify the roof over my head. I belonged simply because I showed up. As I wiped down the table, my phone buzzed. Caleb's name lit the screen. The first message since the night he cast me out. "Things rough? Can we stay a while?" The words carried no apology, only assumption, as if the door had been waiting open all along. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed slowly, carefully. "There's no space for lies here anymore. I wish you peace." I hit send and set the phone down beside the lemonade pitcher. I stepped back onto the porch, watching the children finish their chalk designs. The house, once a joke, now stood steady behind me, its scars patched, its walls mine alone. $900 had bought me more than a roof. It had bought me clarity, dignity, and a beginning no one could take away. I breathed in the late afternoon air and let it fill me. The house was no longer a burden. It was my foundation.